Well, if I were some globe believer starting my name with Psyman or some washed up hack calling myself a science guy, I really wouldn't like this article. Let's get into it. Here's an article from The Atlantic. Science. Several U.S. states, led by Florida, are flatter than a pancake. This article's from 2014. Says geographers in Kansas look for the country's plain truths. I like this already. In 2003, the Annals of Improbable Research released the results of a study that was not so much groundbreaking as it was ground-battering. Kansas, the tongue-in-cheek analysis found, was flatter than a pancake. The researchers, Mark Fonstad, William Pugich, and Brandon Voigt, used polynomial equations to calculate the flatness of the famously flat state and discovered that, as compared to the topography of an IHOP pancake, it was indeed flatter than a flapjack. Their finding was not incorrect, meaning their finding was correct. Parts of Kansas are, in fact, flatter than a pancake. But the study's focus on Kansas, it turns out, was also misleading because there are states, 6 of them to be specific, that are even flatter than Kansas. The states flatter than a pancake, you could say, could be served in a short stack. This latest flatness finding comes courtesy of geographers at the University of Kansas who just published a paper titled The Flatness of U.S. States in Geographical Review, a peer-reviewed journal published by the American Geographical Society. KU professor Jerome Dobson and his colleague Joshua Campbell, who works at the State Department's Office of the Geographer, conducted a geomorphometric analysis of the contiguous United States, a measure basically of the nation's lumps and bumps. To do that, the pair developed a method of reckoning flatness, creating an algorithm that would allow them to develop a comprehensive estimate of states' relative pancakery. I just love how they're making up words here. Their focus was human perception of flatness. Since the point of the study, Dobson told me, was largely to combat public perceptions about Kansas's flatness. Those perceptions translate, he says, to public perceptions about Kansas's boringness. To estimate geographical flatness as perceived by the human eye, Dobson and Campbell put math behind the experience of looking toward the horizon and seeing a rise of land, in their case to the height of a tall tree at a distance of 3 miles. From there, Dobson says, we put together a simulation, one that approximates what you would see if you were standing on one spot and turning around 360 degrees and recording what you see every 16 times as you turn around. Once they developed their algorithm, Dobson and Campbell processed elevation data gathered from NASA's Shuttle Radar Topography mission for the contiguous U.S., 48 states, and the District of Columbia. Why not Alaska and Hawaii? We knew the answer for those well enough. Dobson told me, we knew they weren't going to be the flattest. They gridded their findings into 90-meter cells. They then categorized each cell as not flat, flat, flatter, or flattest. It was a lot of computation, Dobson says, because we're measuring every 90 meters or every 300 feet across the country. From there, they compared each state's percentage of flatness and ranked them. The top 10 flattest states, per their results, and ranked according to their total flat, flatter, and flattest designations are Florida, Illinois, North Dakota, Louisiana, Minnesota, Delaware, Kansas, Texas, Nevada, and Indiana. In other words, Dobson says, what we're seeing is the percentage of Kansas that is flat is a lower percentage than that of Florida. While the list offers a ranked percentage of the state's area in the flat, flatter, and flattest categories, you can see a rank of states according to the flattest category alone charted on the map above. So why do this work? Why focus on the flatness in the first place? For one thing, there's a novelty of it. People measure mountains and hills all the time. I'm not sure anybody has purposely measured flat before. Oh yes, we have. Oh, we definitely have. Dobson says there's also the fact that perceptions matter, not just culturally, but also economically. For those who think this is a frivolous study, it's important because it really does affect people's perceptions, Dobbs notes. People don't apply for jobs here because they think it's flat and boring. There are also more practical concerns, Dobson says. Detailed data when it comes to land's flatness and slopes can help determine where, for example, to place infrastructure like wind farms. And there are, should you be looking to start a wind farm, lots of places in Kansas that would fit the bill. To the extent that, per his work, It would take a mountain higher than Mount Everest, Dobson says, in order for Kansas not to be flatter than a pancake. And that's a relief. I'll leave a link in the description for this article. Well, you look at that. 10 states that measure out to be flatter than a pancake. And I believe it's going to be a little more difficult for globe believers to argue against this one, also seeing as how this article used a lot of their favorite buzzwords like science, university, peer-reviewed journal, and professor. Now, these are people with credentials that have actually gone out and did these measurements and observations. So how are you going to come up with a debunking video for that one? I mean, we in the flat earth community, we've been looking for this elusive curvature for a long time. And I know there was some guy 2,000 plus years ago that used sticks and shadows to supposedly determine the curvature of the earth, but who are you going to believe? Some dude from 2,000 years ago with sticks and shadows, or are you going to believe scientists that are probably still alive today that did these observations like less than 5 years ago? That's on you. I'm just saying, in the flat earth community, we've been looking for curvature for a long time. You know, firing lasers across water, bringing boats back into view after they supposedly went over the curvature, observing things that are entirely too far away and should be hidden behind the supposed curvature over vast stretches of water. But these guys actually measured out on land, and that's pretty cool. At this point, I'd encourage you to pass this video off to anyone who you've been in a verbal confrontation with, digital or, you know, face-to-face, and ask them what they think about that. Because Kansas is a lot smaller than Texas, and Texas was on that list. And if Texas measures out to be flatter than a pancake, it's missing a whole lot more than the 20 miles of curvature that's missing in Kansas. So if that curvature is not in the U.S., it's got to be somewhere else, or it's non-existent. I'm guessing that the earth is flat, but you can make your own determination. Me personally, if I were a rational thinking adult that still believed that I lived on a spinning ball, I would be asking questions. One of those questions would be, if there are multiple states in the U.S. that measure out to be flatter than a pancake, how exactly do I live on a globe? I encourage you to share this video, and just to have some fun, if you live in one of these states, go ahead and leave that in the comment section. And if you know somebody that lives in one of the states on that top 10 list, go ahead and send this video to them and let them know that they live in one of the flattest states in the country. That's all I got for this one. Just reporting the news, people. As always, be good to each other, take care of yourself, stay flat.